Oftentimes, causes we donate to have a very little impact on what we think we're supporting. I always thought there's like a better way to make an impact. It was fall of 2021. We were very aware of brands that were supporting causes they didn't personally believe in. A lot of people wanted to find alternative brands or products they believe in that also support their values. I literally started 7 Weeks Coffee 2 weeks after I got married with the idea of giving back to support local pregnancy resource centers, to take a stand as a company in the marketplace for certain values that are often overlooked. And that was kind of the genesis of 7 Weeks Coffee. What I realized is oftentimes causes we donate to have a very little impact on what we think we're supporting. So from that experience of raising money for a lot of great causes, I always thought there's like a better way to make an impact. And someone who loved business, I was like, why not use business as like the catalyst to really make an impact or a change in a cause you really believe in? And so during, it was fall of 2021. It was, right after COVID, there was a lot of, I think, shift in the economy at the time too. So it was a really good time where people were very aware of brands that were supporting causes they didn't personally believe in. I don't know if you remember this, Robert, but the big Target, backlash where, millions of consumers were upset about the political stance these corporations were taking. And really, a lot of people wanted to find alternative brands or products they believe in that also support their values. So it was all during that time. I was very passionate and wanted to see how I could use business to support the pro-life movement. So I got to visit a pregnancy care center, which are the hands and feet of the pro-life movement years ago, and it left a big impression upon my heart. And it's amazing what they do. So a pregnancy care center, they support vulnerable women and children, moms in the community, truly to help provide resources so moms can choose life for their baby. So I got to see that firsthand years ago, and for years that was always a passion of mine, supporting the pro-life movement. And so when I was working in political fundraising, thinking about business and just seeing, consumers wanting to switch products to things they believed in, I don't know what it was. I'll call it a God moment though, but I literally Googled pro-life coffee, just the idea of like, people love coffee. It's a great way to share a story, come around a mission, to really buy into a certain cause. So I Googled it, nothing came up, and it was a light bulb moment right then and there. It was, picked up the phone, called my wife. I said, hey, I have this idea for a pro-life coffee company. What do you think? She paused and was like, we just got married 2 weeks ago. What are we doing starting a company? But she definitely came around board and helped me come up with a name. But yeah, I literally started 7 Weeks Coffee 2 weeks after I got married with the idea of giving back to support local pregnancy resource centers, to be, to take a stand as a company in the marketplace for certain values that are often overlooked. And that was kind of the genesis of 7 Weeks Coffee. And for us, it was, how do we do that? It's by giving back a portion of every proceed. So we donate back 10% of every sale. It's a huge portion of our profits. And that was kind of the genesis of it. And it started right there, just right after I got married. And that was just over 4 years ago. And I have not stopped since.
I love it, man. What was the driving factor for you wanting to go down the pro-life path to begin with? Of all the different reputable causes to support, what was that one? Why was that one the one that stuck with you?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I got to visit a pregnancy resource center years ago. This was right after college in 2019, and it left this huge impression upon my heart. I didn't really know what it was or what they do, but it's funny when you actually dive into certain missions and charities. The pro-life cause, the more you look at it, the more you realize how of an honorable cause and in need of support it is. What they end up doing is oftentimes relying on volunteers, a handful of staff that are often underpaid, and they're serving the most important role in the community, which is providing for pregnant moms who need help. So that's really what always stuck with me, and I wanted to support that through coffee. And another thing is pregnancy care centers and the pro-life movement specifically, they operate on a very local level. So I love this idea of donating locally. So the bigger impact you have in your community, the better. It's awesome that there's, national organizations for a lot of different charities or causes, but giving money back to a local level, I think has the biggest impact, right? It's getting into the community, not going to some, large organization where money kind of trickles down often. So for us, giving back to local pregnancy resource centers, was the mission, and it's why I was super passionate about it, because I got to see a local center years ago, and yeah, it was super small. It was very underfunded. It was understaffed, but they have these incredible stories of moms coming through their doors, and they are literally helping provide for them, provide for their future families, and change the trajectory of lives. So you see this incredible mission, you see this incredible impact, but this need, there's a huge gap with support for these organizations. So that's why we, really honed in on supporting pro-life groups. And I'll just throw a quick fact out there. Less than 0.2% of all charitable donations ends up in the hands of a pro-life organization. So when you think about organizations that need funding the most, have the most righteous cause, in my opinion, supporting, vulnerable mothers who are facing unplanned pregnancies, that's got to be pretty high on the list, in my opinion. But yet those organizations receive less than 0.5% of all charitable donations. So there's a gap there, and we seek to help fill that.
I love it, man. What made you find yourself at the Pregnancy Resource Center to begin with? Like, was that just a random charitable organization that you volunteered at, or like was that something that you had interest in before ever going there?
Yeah, it was one of those times in my life where I look back upon and realizing how pivotal it was, but it was the summer after I graduated college. Like, full transparency, I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I was still finishing up. I played college golf, so my whole life was dedicated to athletics. I couldn't pursue that professionally. I graduated with very little real world experience, because all I cared about was, golf and my sport, thinking that was the only thing in my life. But soon you quickly learn, after college, the music stops and you got to get into the real world. I didn't know what I wanted to do after I graduated, and really just trying to discern God's will for my life. I took like the summer off, in the sense I just worked, odd jobs, and I interned at my church. There was an opportunity to intern at my church back home in Cleveland, Ohio. And one of the things we did was, you get plugged into the impact they're doing in their community. So one of the things they work with was the local pregnancy resource center. So part of the internship was going there, seeing what they do, how we can help and support them. And that's what really resonated, with me. And that's how I ended up, getting connected to my first, pregnancy resource center. It was definitely an eye-opening experience, and I look back upon that like short 3 months of my life. And you see kind of God's hand when you look back. You can't tell in the moment, but you look back, it's like, oh wow, God put that in my life so I can understand the importance of the pro-life movement. And, oh gosh, that's 6 years ago. Here I am today, and we get to support over, 1,000 pro-life pregnancy care centers through 7 Weeks Coffee.
Super cool, man. Were you raised in like a church-based Christian home, or like how did that catalyst come to be?
Yeah, I had great parents, and lucky enough to be raised in a Christian home. And, always, it's one of those things, you grow up with a certain worldview, but you have to one day step into that yourself. And so I always, believed, just specifically in the pro-life, believed I was pro-life, believed that life begins at conception, believed it's abortion is, is essentially taking and killing the innocent life, which is always wrong. But you don't know what that means. So until you actually start investigating yourself, understanding what actually happens, who the people that are helping support women, what's the, the issues what women face and why they consider abortion. And so all of that, I grew up in a Christian home, but you have to at some point step into that yourself, of what you believe and why you believe it. So a lot of that did happen over that summer, like I mentioned. But luckily, I'm grateful for just having parents that always instilled those values in me at an early age.
Mm-hmm. And you said you were involved in like political fundraising before you started the business?
Yeah.
Something like that?
So kind of backing up and starting from, when I graduated college, had that internship, got to see what a pregnancy care center was. It really like solidified my desire to support the pro-life movement, not knowing how I would do that one day. Lo and behold, through coffee. But after that, I moved to DC because I just wanted to get involved politically. Kind of like this idea of, bringing biblical principles to government, like to Washington. So very motivated to come to DC, quote unquote, try to make a difference, get involved. And it was a great experience. I got to work for a couple of great organizations, and, I ended up learning digital fundraising and raising money for a handful of candidates and PACs, through the 2020 election, which was a wild time. And, I had all that, time to like learn, I'd say, business and also fundraising, and just kind of how the industry works, which ultimately I think prepared me for Seven Leagues Coffee, because a lot of what we do is, instead of donating to a candidate or a PAC or to a cause, you're buying a bag of coffee to make the very same impact. So it's funny how those 2 years kind of working in fundraising really did prepare me for Seven Leagues Coffee. It was a great learning experience, and I think what's been helpful and was getting Seven Leagues Coffee started.
Was there a lot of pushback, or was it pretty receptive in DC when it comes to like biblical underpinnings to political, governmental regulations? Like, were they receptive to that?
It's funny. When I first moved here, I thought I'm conservative. I thought, just because if you're conservative, you align with a biblical worldview, and that's not always the case. It's much more of a side thought, I would say. And what's sad is, our founders really sought to put faith at the center of our government, at the center of politicians, at the center of commerce, and of how politics should work, because it's such a guiding factor in righteous decisions, in promoting virtue. And that has really been, stripped out of the entire political ecosystem on the right and the left. Obviously, I'd say more people on the right support a biblical worldview, but it's not as common as you would think. So yeah, that it's sad in a sense, because it's such an important part, I think, to, fixing the problems that we have, especially in politics, is having faith be a central key player in that.
Do you feel like that will continue to decline, or do you think there's anything on the horizon that kind of shifts that tide the opposite direction?
I want to be an optimist with it, but the current state, I would say there's not clear signs that, the institutions that run our country or make our laws are moving towards a biblical worldview. Now, there's definitely great politicians that try to promote that and really advance that, but it's limited in the sense that politics today is such about the quick talking points and trying to just grab power or authority as quickly as possible, and have this there's such a uniparty feel to Washington, where we argue about all these fringe issues, but there's the most important things that affect our day-to-day lives. There's a very large overlap between Republicans and Democrats agreeing on, whether foreign policy, economic policy, and all the time, faith and biblical values are always pushed to the side. It's been slowly being eroded from our country, which I think is a huge part of our problem today. The political divide, I think, has a lot to do with the abandonment of faith.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, man. I feel like having moved to DC to make an impact, then kind of hitting a wall in some regards with
100%
regulation. It's like, where can you make a grassroots movement from a capitalistic standpoint using a business that makes an impact? And like doing that is super awesome, man. So you set out to make 7 Weeks Coffee. And where's the name come from?
Okay, so this is a great story. So when I called my wife, when I said I got this idea for a pro-life coffee company, and she's like, totally take it back. Like I said, it was literally 2 weeks after we got married. I'm telling her I want to start a company. The first question she asked me was, so what are you going to call it? And I said, I have no idea yet. And then she asked me the inspiring question. She's like, oh, don't sometimes, moms who are expecting will say like my little bean, or like something around like in a pregnancy term. And so she's like, when is a baby the size of a coffee bean? I don't know. I look it up. It's 7 weeks, a baby the size of a coffee bean. It's the same time a heartbeat's detected on ultrasound. And so I was like, boom, that is the name and mission. 7 Weeks Coffee, support pregnancy care centers and ultrasound services so moms can hear their child's heartbeat for the first time. And that's why it's in our logo. It's on my shirt. Just this idea that, it's true. When a mom hears her child's heartbeat for the first time, she is 80% of the time more likely, or 80% of the time, to choose life for her baby, because it just provides that humanity aspect that there is a heartbeat, living in you, and that's not a clump of cells. It's a living person with a heart beating, and so that's where we get our name, our mission, and purpose. And so we now encourage consumers to help fund ultrasound services through their morning coffee.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Savage Clip. If you want to see the full-blown deep dive, check out the full episode here, and I'll see you there.